So my name's Adam Silver. I'm a archive support rep over here at Metalogix, and I've been working with Archive Manager for a long time. I've talked to several of you a couple of times, and we're going to talk today about importing users into Archive Manager Exchange Edition. So this is going to be a pretty simple, quick take, but really important information that does tend to trip people up occasionally. We're going to go right into it. All right, so our goal today is an overview of the steps required to import new user mailboxes into Archive Manager Exchange Edition, both manually and via Active Directory. So we're going to tackle it in a couple of steps. I'm going to flip back and forth to my test server as we go back and forth. And we're going to start off with importing mailboxes manually. And in case you haven't done one of these quick takes before, generally the format we use is I'll go through the presentation and we'll talk about how to actually do each step piece by piece, and at the end I'll have a Q&A period where you guys can pop into questions and ask me anything you want, and I'll kind of go in, but we're going to try to stick to the topic of importing mailboxes today. So importing mailboxes manually, the simplest method. I'm going to flip over to my test server right off and I'm going to take a look at that. Okay, so we've got my test archive server here. Hopefully you guys can all see that all right. I'm going to open up Enterprise Manager, and we're going to go in. And as you may or may not know, all of the action when it comes to, that's just a little sequel, I think it's good. There we go, that's better. So Address Book Manager, our Mailboxes tab. Right now I've got one user in there, me. So let's talk about importing new users. So let's say in a very simple situation, you're setting up Archive Manager for the first time. You want to bring a new user into here. You'd want to go into the Mailboxes tab, and you want to right-click. Now, go to Tasks, Import Mailbox Wizard. In here, you're going to have a couple of options, and I'm going to go through each one of these options and show you how each works individually. You can just go straight import from Active Directory. You can choose the location, the container that you want to choose in Active Directory. Usually search for subcontainers. A good way to do this is if you don't know where everything is or you're importing a whole bunch of stuff, is just leave it at the base LDAP here. Search for mailboxes, subcontainers. It's going to bring up every mailbox in the system. So this can be good when you're importing massive amounts of users, but can be kind of unwieldy if you're trying to look for one, because you're going to be flipping through them all. In this case, we don't have that many users, obviously. I'm just going to flip them really quick, and let's say I want to import, test user 1. I'm going to bring in, let's bring in Mark Hartley, our good friend Mark Hartley. And I'm just going to click his name, hit next, hit finish. It's going to reference it. It's going to go through until it says processing finished. Once it says processing's finished, you can just hit close, and Mark's mailbox has appeared in the archive system. Now, it's important to realize this doesn't mean that he is now magically archiving. This means the system recognizes that he's in there. It's a mailbox in the system, but he's still not added to a group, and he would have to be added to a group in order to actually be attached to one of our archive groups. So I'm going to add a group in here. And what we're going to do is create a manual group, user-defined. We call it manual, user-defined, whatever you want to call it. We're going to name the group Manual Group 1. Okay. We're going to finish. Processing finished. We're closed. And you'll notice this guy is highlighted in green, and it says over at the other end, Manual. So that means that this group you need to manually put people into. We just brought Mark in via import, and what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on here, hit Properties, Members, and add Mark into that group. Okay. And just to take it one step further, once we actually come out of Address Book Manager and hit refresh on our session, that group will show up and is available to be set up a job, however you want to do it, and Mark will now archive on that group. So back to our Address Book Manager, we're going to take a look at a couple of more of those options when it comes to importing mailboxes. So again, Tasks, Import Mailbox Wizard. We're going to go to the second one. Now, this is really only comes into play when you're running a system with a lot of different Exchange servers or a single Exchange server with many Exchange information stores or many mailbox databases. you can actually click in here. And the only real difference between this one and the one before is in this case, I can choose the server I want, and I can choose the specific mailbox database I want in it, right? So I'll choose the first one. I think that's where most of our stuff is. So mailbox database there, and I can hit next, and it's going to only bring back mailboxes that are in that mailbox database. It's just a way to narrow it down in a very large system to just the mailboxes you want. So let's say you create a new mailbox database, and you just want to import users from that from that particular mailbox database, that information store. You can actually go in there, do that the same way. You can right-click, you can shift, you can just click all of them as well, and that way you could bring in just the users from that particular information store. In this case, not going to do that right now because I'm going to show you the third way to do it, which import mailbox wizard, and this is search in Active Directory. In your day-to-day kind of importing, this is usually the way you want to go because you're usually looking for one, maybe two users you want to bring in. You know, a new user that's just come into the system, come into the company, you want to add them in. In this case, we can go in and we can look for it. Find test user. And that's going to bring back all of our test users, 1 and 2. I'll grab 2. And I'll select them, put them in the system. And there they go. And again, we could assign that to that manual group if we wanted, and off they'd be archiving. Another note here that trips people up is a lot of people go in, they say, well, I've got this old user. I'm not really accessing them anymore. They've been gone from the company for a long time. I'd just like to get rid of them. And they'll go in here, and they'll go tasks, purge mailbox. Now, I'll start actually on my own name because I actually have an archive system, emails archived under my name. If I try to purge, it's actually going to pop up and say, this still contains documents, can't be deleted. As long as I've got archive mail in the system that's under a retention policy, it says this archive mail has to remain in the system for this long, it won't let me delete my mailbox account. There's just nothing I can do about it until there's no more archive mail in the system. Mark Hartley or test user 2 that I've just brought into the system haven't archived anything. Nothing in the archive mailbox at all. I can purge them at leisure. So in order to actually remove someone completely from the archive system, you first have to delete all of their archives from the system. Then you can purge them. Now, how to delete them, that's a totally different quick take. If you have any questions about that, just send us an email at Case and we'll answer that. So those are the 3 basic imports when it comes to there. You know, Active Directory for everything, information store for specific information stores, and searching in Active Directory for specific users. And also, you know, if you want to narrow it down, I should have added, you can at any point change the base container and just narrow it down to, you know, people within a specific OU or wherever you need to look. Let's get out of there. And now we're going to flip back over to our PowerPoint, and we're going to look at our second piece. So importing mailboxes from Active Directory. Now, the archive system is capable of monitoring an Active Directory security group, and as you put users into that security group, it will automatically import those users, bring them into the system, and assign them to a group. A lot of people don't know this. It's actually, we come across servers quite a bit that are running only manual groups, and they say, I wish we could mitigate this. We could set it up so it's automatically bringing users in, and we're going to talk a bit about that. So flip back over to the server. So in this case, all the action really comes from this Groups tab. You'll see that we created this group, this manual group, that we can add or remove people from at our leisure. You know, we've got our Add button. We can add Mark. We can add me. But we've got another option here. We create another group that's called Import from Active Directory. Now, this is what we call an auto group. And in this case, I'm just going to search in subcontainers, same way I did before, but in this case, it's going to look for groups within Active Directory, security groups. And I've created a group, and it's something similar to what you would want to do, is create a group called Archive Users or something similar. Another problem we run into quite often is people who will come in here when they initially start the system, and they will do this. They'll just say, okay, I want everything, so I'm just going to pick everything. And they bring in every group in Active Directory into their security, into the archive system, and it becomes a huge mess. The best way to do this by far is to go into Active Directory, create a security group called Archive Users or Archive, something you'll remember as attached to this system, and then when you provision a new staff member that comes in, you want them to be archived, just make it part of the process to add them to that group. In this case, I'm going to choose email archive users right here. I created that guy earlier, and I put some people in it. I'm going to hit next, and we always want to allow updated references because we want it to keep up if something moves back and forth. Automatically import group members refers to right now. Do we right now want to bring the group members in? I'm actually going to leave that one off for now. And mailbox members, same thing. We'll leave that one off, and we're going to show you how to do this kind of outside of this, how it would work automatically. So we've created this group. It's called Email Archiver Users 1. It's always going to be called the same thing as the security group it's attached to, and it's marked as auto. And you'll notice if we go into the properties, we go to members, we cannot add or remove. It's not an available function because this is monitoring that Active Directory group, that security group. So if we go to mailboxes, nothing's changed right now. Now, had I hit that check mark for automatically import stuff during the process, it would have brought those in. But I want to get into how it will do it on a regular basis. So we're going to go to General Settings, and this little guy, Synchronization Parameters, is important in this case because this is going to denote how often the system reaches out and synchronizes with Active Directory. So I hit Settings on Automatic Synchronization Parameters, and we want to make sure everything's checked off here. We want to import new group members, new mailbox members, and the important piece is the scheduling. So right now I've got it set to every 12 hours, it looks like. We often set it to every 6 hours, and you can just decide on your own what days and what hour you want that to happen. And every time it hits one of these blocks, it's going to run a synchronization against Active Directory. So every single time you add new people into that security group, at one of these marks, when it comes in and does the synchronization, it's going to automatically grab them and bring them into the system. So I'm just going to hit OK on that. Because I don't want to wait until the 6 hour mark, I'm going to actually go up to synchronization, and I'm going to synchronize address book, which essentially is doing the exact same thing that the system is doing on a schedule. I'm just forcing it, which is a great tool if you're bringing in, let's say you've got 100 new mailboxes you want to bring into the system, and you put them all in that security group, and you don't want to wait until the 6 hour mark. That's how you do it. That's how you'd force it. So synchronization. Now, if we go into mailboxes and we refresh, there we go. So it took a second for Active Directory to catch up once I put them in there because I had put them in the wrong group. But our test users are the ones that I had dropped into that Active Directory group, and now they've been imported into the system. Now, they are automatically imported into our group here, and we'll see them in Properties Members. So test user 1 and 2. These groups will automatically appear in our Enterprise Manager in the same way as the other group did. I purged the other one, but this one will show up, and again, we can go and manipulate this group. And the upside is, of course, any member, any new user you put into that mailbox group, when it hits one of those synchronization points every 6 hours, will be brought into the system. Another question we get all the time is, does it get removed when you pull it out of the Active Directory group? The answer is actually a little bit twofold. So this test user 2, if you brought him out of that user group, when you ran the synchronization, he would stay in here, because if you remember earlier, we talked about you can't purge someone out of a group once they've been archived. They'll stay here in the Mailboxes tab, but they will be removed from the actual auto group. So they'll disappear from here, but they will remain in here. The import system on Active Directory only works one way, so it can bring people in, but it can't purge them out of the system. You have to do that. So we're going to move along right now because we're getting a little bit tight on time. These things can be pretty short. So synchronizing automatic archive groups for importing. We actually talked about that. So that's going into the synchronization group, setting them up to synchronization points and having Active Directory reaching out and putting those groups in place. So we'll talk about mailbox migration. I wanted to touch on this real quick because it's a function that a lot of people don't know is there, and it comes up every once in a while. So in any of our users here, let's say, I'm going to use myself as an example. So if let's say theoretically that I got up and took a 3 or 4 month sabbatical to Hawaii, which would be awesome. I would love to do that. And I was gone so long that they just deactivated my mailbox account. And let's say someone deleted it by accident later on because they thought that I was gone. And then I came back after 4 months and said, hey, where's my email? So everyone kind of panicked, ran around, and eventually they created a new mailbox just under my name, Adam Silver. But you've got this old archive mailbox called Adam Silver that's particularly stuck to not necessarily the name in Exchange, but it's looking at the GUID of the original mailbox. So if they create a new mailbox called Adam Silver in Exchange, it actually assigns it a new GUID. So the things do not match. There's no way that this is just going to attach to that new mailbox and say, okay, this is the same mailbox as it used to be, because it's reading the wrong ID. In this case, what we can do is we can right-click, and we can go to Tasks and Migrate Mailbox. Now, the idea of doing a Migrate Mailbox is attach this archive mailbox to a new mailbox in Exchange. So I've taken the liberty of making myself a second mailbox in Exchange. And you'll notice that archive refs, this is the one that it used to be on. This would be a dead mailbox. You wouldn't be able to access it. The archive stuff is still there, but there's nothing on the Exchange side. And this is the new one I created in Users. So I'm going to select that. And it's going to be very sure that you want to change this, because you can really trip yourself up by pointing at a different mailbox. Yeah, it's the new values in the old LDAP path, just to make sure. We hit yes, and simple as that. You'll see the alias switched over from A Silver to, I think it was A Silv before. So this is now pointed at this new mailbox, and we'll start archiving accordingly. It'll go into that mailbox next time the job runs, and it will do everything it would have done before. So migrating mailboxes can be pretty handy if you're trying to revive a dead mailbox or recreate a dead mailbox. We'll flip back to our slide here, and I'm going to go over really simple mailbox import issues that come up often. They're pretty simple stuff, but they can be common. Specifically, the licensing issue is a very common issue. I'll flip back really quick to the server, and we'll look at licensing. Obviously, you're licensed by mailbox, so you've got a certain amount of licenses in the system. And once you hit the end of that licenses, you can't have new mailboxes. So I've got 12 out of 20 in this case. Let's say I had 20 activated licenses out of 20 licenses. So I've got 20 licenses, I've got 20 mailboxes. The archive system will stop importing those. When it hits a synchronization point and looks into that Active Directory security group and tries to bring them down, it'll say, I can't bring them in. But it won't notify you. It won't tell you anything. You'll go in, you'll look, and you'll just see that new members aren't popping up. They're not appearing into the group. That's the first place you want to look. If everything in the system looks fine, but you're just not getting new members on an automatic group, chances are it's your licenses. So you'll have to either deactivate guys or actually go in and get some new licenses from us. And again, deactivation, I'm going to go over that real quick. We activate or deactivate a mailbox. All this check mark does is it tells you this user is able to archive. So the difference between right now my mailbox archiving actively and unchecking it is now my information, my data is still accessible. You can go into my archives, you can export them, you can move them around, do whatever you want, but it won't archive anything new. So let's say I had left the company. You would want to uncheck me. It's actually good practice to uncheck me, hit apply, and OK, because what you've done is by unchecking that activation piece, you have actually freed up a license. You'll actually see the license number cut down one. So if I refresh this, so we've got, oh, actually, what it did was add the new ones that I had added in and take away mine. So let's try to get on marks just to see the action of it, because it hadn't added the ones I had brought into the system that had used up licenses on. Okay. So now that we're at 14, that should drop us to 13 licenses. Refresh. Okay. So this way we've freed up 2 more licenses, 2 more people can come in. It's a good idea to deactivate licenses for mailboxes you aren't using, even if you still want to access their archives. The last piece, and the last thing comes up less commonly, but does appear at times, is home server changes. So quite often people will actually have a new Exchange server, a system with multiple mailbox servers, and they haven't brought one of the mailbox servers into the system. And the first thing they try to do is try to import users into the into the archive from that exchange, assuming that it will reach across the exchange system on any mailbox server they put up. And that's actually not true. If you don't have the archive, if the archive system doesn't see that server, if your server isn't listed in here in the servers tab, it just doesn't see it. The archive system has no idea where it is or what it is, and if you try to import it, you'll get an error that says it doesn't exist. You'll see over here in the home server column, it will actually tell you what mailbox is on which server. We only got one in the 2013. It's the 2013 public folders, actually. So if your home server is not in the archive system, it's not in the servers tab, you can't bring users in. And then you've got to go through the process of importing that server into the system, setting permissions, and getting it all set up. And that's another quick take, but you can always get information for that from us. So I think that is it for my spiel here. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys for some questions. If you want to ask some questions, just pop them in the questions tab, and I'll be watching it there. And happy to answer anything you've got. Any questions out there? Okay, the question is from Mark, importing with a group is great. Can you also assign rights? Do you mean can you assign rights automatically from Exchange, Mark? Or do you mean automatically assign rights within the archive system? I think I'll just cover both here. So within the archive system, the groups have no effect over assigning rights. So the archive system rights have to be assigned within Mailbox Rights Manager. There's no automatic way around that. The only way to actually assign rights from one archive mailbox to another is by right-clicking in here and using the Mailbox Security folder. Exchange rights, there is a synchronization process for exchange rights, and you probably saw that pop up in here with synchronized permissions, but that has to do with synchronizing permissions with permissions in Exchange. So bringing the rights of a mailbox that has rights to another mailbox from Exchange into the system. It's a fairly complicated setup. If you want to get that set up, you should open a case and just let us know. We'll pop into your specific environment and help you out with that. All right, anyone else? And another question from Mark, do you have to manually deactivate mailboxes if you take them out of the group? Yeah, you do. Deactivating and activating mailboxes is something that's done completely manually. It will, if you take it out of the group, it will remove it from your actual automatic group, but it won't deactivate it. There's a lot of situations where you don't want it to deactivate it because you brought it out of the group, so that is a manual process. Otherwise, it would cause a bit of chaos if it just automatically pulled them out and deactivated a mailbox without telling anyone. So I should mention with the activation, another way to, you don't have to deactivate stuff piece by piece either. Let's say you've got 100 mailboxes or 10 mailboxes you want to deactivate. You don't have to go into each and click the mailboxes activated button. You can actually highlight a bunch of them or highlight whichever ones you want. And in tasks, you can activate or deactivate, and that will do a mass action on the ones that you've selected, either activation or deactivation. So that can be handy when you've got a whole bunch of people that you suddenly realize have left the company and are taking up licenses and you want to go in and just deactivate them all. Another question, what about when you delete the account from Exchange entirely? Again, when you delete the account from Exchange entirely, it's not going to deactivate it automatically. It doesn't have a way of knowing that you've deactivated it, but you will actually notice, and I don't have an example here because these are all active in Exchange, but when you look in the Mailboxes tab, you will see a red X on the envelope on the left when it's lost connection to its Exchange mailbox. It won't automatically deactivate, but it'll let you know it can't reach it. Of course, the difference between it being deactivated in Exchange and just not having permissions to access it would be the same to the archive system. So it would just notify you that for some reason it can't access that, but it won't deactivate it automatically. You would have to go in and hit deactivate. So it's a good idea, it's a good practice to every once in a while come into the system, look at users that have been disabled or removed, and go in manually, pull them out. The thinking is that if you automatically deactivate a mailbox for any reason, you could be running into trouble because you wouldn't even know till down the line. So, I mean, it wouldn't be archiving anymore, but it wouldn't actually be freed up a license yet either, because they would assume that either something's wrong with it or it's been deactivated. All right, so conscious of the time, and I've got a couple of cases waiting on me, and I'm going to go wrap those up. I'm going to wrap up the quick take, and I just want to say thanks for all of you that showed up, and I hope you got some good information out of it. If you do run into any other questions about this or anything else, just open up a case with us and give us an email or call our dispatch, and we are always happy to answer any questions you might have. And I hope everyone has a lovely day. Bye now.